It's a cloudy but hot day here at the Guiana Space Centre, where you are joining us live for the launch of the next 4 satellites in the O3b constellation for SES. I'm in the Mission Control Centre. I'm Katie Haswell, and I'm joined by Luce Fabregat from Arianespace. And Luce, it's a big welcome to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome here to our customers, our guests in the French Space Centre, and welcome to everybody watching us on internet.
Now, we are flying on board a Soyuz launcher today. It's made of 4 stages. We call those stages 4 sections. The first 3 stages are the propelled part of the flight, getting us away from our planet. And then if we take a look at the top of the launch vehicle, inside there you can see our satellites, and they are the 4 O3b satellites for SES networks, all tucked up inside the launcher. Nice and cool inside there with the air conditioning systems. They're in first class with their seat belts on. Now, Luce, before we talk to you, let me just tell everybody your job title. Luce is the Executive Vice President of Missions, Operations and Purchasing here at Arianespace, and you're in charge of the Flight Directorate today. Luce, just tell us a little bit more about our mission today.
So today we are launching 4 satellites, as you said, telecom satellites. So they are not going to the geostationary orbit, which is the usual orbit for telecom satellites. They are going to what we call the medium Earth orbit at 8,000 kilometers from Earth, so 4 times closer than the geostationary orbit, which allows a low latency connectivity.
So how has the countdown been progressing?
So we have started in the night here. The operations, they are going very smoothly, and we have removed already the mobile gantry. The launch vehicle is getting ready to lift off, and we need an additional check on the ground. So we are going to target a launch at 2 hours and 3 minutes local time.
Yes, well, rather than 2 hours, 3 minutes past 2 local time.
Past 2, okay, exactly. And so we are ready, and all the computers on board, on ground, and the operators are currently preparing the launch vehicle for the flight.
So we've reset our launch time for 33 minutes later.
Exactly. We will take 33 minutes, and we can target 33 minutes later without any difficulty. So we will take time for additional check, and then go for launch in 33 minutes later.
Now, Luce, it's going to be a long mission today, actually, because it's going to take us over 2 hours, I think roughly about 2 hours and 20 minutes to deliver our first set of satellites. Can you explain what's going to happen?
So after liftoff, there will be the phase of what we call the 3 stage, the 3 lower stage of the Soyuz. Then they will separate the upper stage, the frigate upper stage. The frigate upper stage will have 2 boosts of its main engine above Atlantic Ocean and Africa, and we will follow this boost from our ground stations. Then there will have a long ballistic phase of 1 hour and 20 minutes, and after this ballistic phase, when we'll be above the Pacific Ocean and at a high altitude at that time, there will be a new boost of the main engine before the separation of the 2 first satellites, and then 20 minutes later, the 2 last satellites. So the whole mission, as you said, will last for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Luce, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the floor. You can now go back to your place, the Flight Directorate back there. Thank you, Luce. Luce Fabregat, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as Luce has just explained to us, so Luce is actually now taking up her position behind me, is what we call the fishbowl. This is reinforced glass, and the operational teams are working here, and she is taking up her position on the Flight Directorate. Now, as Luce just explained, we have taken the option today, which is an option on this particular flight, to launch 33 minutes later than the planned launch time. So we're going to be launching at 2:03, 3 minutes past 2. That's here local time, so universal time, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 minutes past, 3 minutes past 5, 3 minutes past 6, I believe. So we're going to take a little break now in our programme. This is giving everybody a chance to sort of take a breather, and we'll be coming back to you 11 minutes before the launch, the new launch time. So we'll see you back here then. Hello again and welcome back. You are with us. We are live at the Guiana Space Centre here on the edge of the Amazon rainforest, and we are here for the launch of the next 4 satellites in the O3b constellation. Satellites for SES and built by Thales Alenia Space. So we chose to take a second option for a launch time today. We have always had 2 options on this launch for a launch time, and we chose to take the option which was 33 minutes after the scheduled liftoff time. It's a feature of some Soyuz launches. It actually gives everybody extra flexibility if they need a bit more time. So we have reset the clock for the launch time, which is now 14:03, so 3 minutes past 2. That's here in Kourou, and 3 minutes past 5. That's universal time. Looking here at the Jupiter Mission Control Centre. The program director for Arianespace is Véronique Loisel. These are the satellite teams. You can see on the top right-hand side of your screen that the clock has now restarted, and we are 10 minutes and 40 seconds to launch. Various key people we're looking at. This is the range operations manager today. It's Jean Royer.
H0 moins 10 minutes 20 secondes. Top, début de la séquence finale lanceur.
And he's just announced the beginning of the synchronized sequence, the final phase of the synchronized sequence there. And what that means is the computers are now running all the final checks. They run a very impressive list of operations. And the teams watching over those are close by at the Launch Control Centre. And here we're looking at the Soyuz launcher on the pad. The skies have cleared a bit. It's actually looking quite nice out there. It's going to be hot. Now here we have the launch zone. We can see from a distance with our drone flying over a number of different facilities. This is the hangar where we store the containers which have the parts of the Soyuz in them. And then to the left of that, you can just see this is the Launch Control Centre. It's where the teams are right now monitoring the countdown. This is the building called the MIC. It's the assembly building. The vehicle is actually assembled from those parts in the containers horizontally. The upper stage is fueled here in the FQ building, just close by. And you can see the rail attaching all the buildings down the middle. Once the launcher has been assembled, or the first 3 stages, it travels down here to the launch pad with its 4 lightning masts, and also you can see the mobile gantry there, and it's erected horizontally. And the top part, which is inside here, the frigate upper stage with the satellites attached, are all mounted on top. And look at that launcher there, standing tall. And we're going to see what the teams have been doing in the launch campaign.
Hello, I'm Davy Franken and I'm the mission director for the VS22 launch campaign. I'm responsible for the overall organization of the satellite campaign, the interfacing with the launch vehicle and the final chronology. We are now in the final phase of this 22nd Soyuz launch campaign from Kourou for the 5th batch of O3b Satellites. The satellite campaign started on the 2nd of February when the 4 satellites arrived at the Félix Éboué airport in an Ilyushin aircraft. The satellites and allied equipment were transported to the S5C facilities the same day. In the S5C, the satellites were unpacked one by one and were installed in the clean room, after which they were subjected to an extensive electrical checkout. Also, the propulsion system was carefully verified before starting the fueling preparations. On the 19th of February, the first satellite was transferred to the S5B fueling hall. After finalization of the fueling preparations, the satellite was filled with hydrazine, then pressurized and finally integrated on a dedicated dispenser. The next 3 satellites followed the same process in the following weeks. The stack with the 4 satellites was finalized on the 14th of March.
For this VS22 launch campaign, I'm the COOL, Launch Site Head of Operations. I lead the launch campaign operational team working on the ground to make both the launcher and the ground installations ready for launch. The Soyuz VS22 launcher campaign started on February the 6th with the arrival of the frigate upper stage in the MIC building. During the first 3 weeks of the launch campaign, frigate underwent various electrical and pneumatic checks. After those 3 weeks, frigate was transferred to the F-Cube filling building. This is on the Soyuz launch complex. In parallel, the assembly operations of the tree stage were carried out at the MIC building. Soyuz is assembled horizontally. First, we put together the 2 parts of the central body. Then, we assembled around the central body the 4 boosters. These give Soyuz its characteristic, highly aerodynamic silhouette. Finally, we assembled the 3rd stage on the central core, easily spotted thanks to the lattice. After assembly, the tri-stage underwent various electrical and pneumatic functional tests. But back to frigate. After filling operations in the F-Cube building, frigate was transferred to the S3B building, 12 kilometers from the Soyuz launch pad.
After a standby phase of 1 week, the stack was transported to the S3B building in a CCU3 container. On the 26th of March, the dispenser with the 4 satellites was integrated onto the frigates. The day after, the clients performed their internal dress rehearsal and the final functional verifications before the encapsulation. The fairing was integrated on the 28th of March, which completed the upper composites.
D-3 is the first of the 4 days of the countdown phase, where the tri-stage and the upper composite are transferred to the launch pad. Early in the morning, the tri-stage is rolled out to the launch zone, then put in vertical position thanks to the erector railcar. In the afternoon, the upper composite reaches the Soyuz launch zone after a trip of around an hour and a half from the S3B. In early evening, the upper composite is hoisted into the mobile gantry, 27 meters high, to be assembled on the tri-stage.
With the Soyuz launcher completely integrated, the different teams performed the general dress rehearsal. The launch readiness review has been held yesterday, and a green light has been given to start the final chronology. We are go for launch.
And the tri-stage, it's often called, or the 3-stage, actually means those first 3 parts, so the boosters, the first stage and the 2nd stage, taking us all the way up to the fairing up there at the top. That's the part that gets us away from our planet. looking here at the Jupiter Mission Control Centre, and here are the teams inside the control centre. The computers are managing the operations right now at this point in the countdown, and as we saw, the teams there in the Launch Control Centre are operating now and monitoring, watching over all of these operations. So while the Mission Control Centre takes charge of the whole mission, the men and women here in the Launch Control Centre are dealing with everything to do with the launch and the flight, so the launch pad and the launch vehicle. Various different teams in here responsible for ground operations, also the flight readiness of our launch vehicle. Of course, we have both Russian and European teams working side by side here, because Soyuz is, of course, a Russian launcher. In Baikonur, in Kazakhstan, the launch control centre is in several bunkers underground, and here, as we saw, it's just next to the pad. We do have about a 2-metre concrete roof on top of the launch control centre. Just at the bottom of the top of the vehicle is, you can see there, you can see the mast. Can you see it just attaching to the top, that big grey mast? Now, he's just announced that the umbilical lines which are inside that mast have now been detached. They fall into a little basket inside the mast. Those lines are the feed lines, taking the services, the electrical services, the air conditioning, etc., to the upper parts of the launcher. And then there's another mast below it, which contains the feed lines to the lower parts, and both of those will be retracting just before launch. Now, everybody is going outside to watch the launch from the 2 terraces, so they can see it with their own eyes and feel the power of the beast as it flies over. Now, a quick word about the ignition sequence. We switch the engines on 16 seconds before launch. That gives us time to throttle up slowly to make sure they're working properly.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins 1 minute. Top, à 0 moins 1 minute.
We are 1 minute to launch, and we are orbiting the next 4 satellites in the O3b constellation, which Thales Alenia Space built for SES networks. And we are flying on board the 22nd Soyuz to launch from the Guiana Space Centre. We're 40 seconds to launch. Soyuz switching to onboard power. Let's watch.
Lagage du Mac KZM. À tous de DDO, attention pour les débuts de la séquence d'allumage du lanceur. Top, à 0 moins 20 secondes. Lagage du Mac VKM, allumage triétage. À tous de DDO, attention pour les décomptes finales. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Top, décollage VS22. La propulsion est nominale.
We are off. The next 4 satellites in the O3b constellation have started their journey. Our cameras following the launcher there as she lifted off from the pad here in the Amazon rainforest. He's telling us that everything is going according to plan. Those 4 boosters are doing all the work right now. They're hauling us away from the gravity of our planet. They burn for a couple of minutes, but that's enough to get us away from the pull of Earth.
La propulsion est nominale.
And their propulsion is normal. Nominal means normal. Bottom left-hand side of the screen, 37 kilometers above the Earth right now and climbing. This is the scheduled moment for the boosters to be jettisoned. And that's what it looks like up there. Cameras on a previous launch. See how they twist and turn? That's all planned.
Séparation des boosters.
And that's been confirmed. We have separated our boosters. And I can hear the sound of the Soyuz here now over the Mission Control Center, which is about 20 kilometers from the pad. It takes a while for the sound to get to us. Trajectory on the top right-hand side, the planned trajectory is the yellow curve, and the cross is the actual position of the launch vehicle. You can see that we're climbing. Our distance in the middle of the bottom of the screen is the distance from the pad if you were to draw a straight line from the pad to the position where the launcher is. And then our speed on the bottom right. Speed on the bottom right is our speed per second, kilometers per second. We're traveling at 2.19 kilometers per second. As we turn around, we're getting a good shot here of the fairing. That's the top of the launch vehicle, and inside there are our satellites. It's protecting us from the rigors of the launch, various things, the sound at liftoff, the acoustic vibrations at liftoff. Don't think you need me to tell you how loud that is.
Le lanceur est stable.
He's telling us the launch vehicle is stable. And also, of course, friction, because if you look at the bottom right-hand side of the left-hand side of the screen, we are now 120 kilometers above Earth. Until now, we've been flying through the dense part of the atmosphere, but we no longer have friction because we are in space. So we can jettison our fairing.
Séparation de la coiffe.
And that's now been confirmed. We have jettisoned the fairing, and we can see our satellites for the first time. The 4 O3b satellites at the front, attached to their special dispenser. And in the middle, can you see a gap between the 3rd stage and the 2nd stage? Well, that's there on purpose with the lattice area. That's because Soyuz uses what's called a hot stage technique. It switches on the engine of the 3rd stage while the 2nd stage is still burning, and that allows the evacuation. So,
Séparation bloc A.
And we have confirmation there that we've now separated the 2nd stage, the block A, and we have jettisoned the rear section. So we are now burning the 3rd stage, and our flight path, you can see it there. We're traveling along the equator, so we've lifted off from the pad. The Galileo is the tracking station here at the Guiana Space Centre. And the next one to pick us up will be the Natal tracking station. These computer-generated images are a simulation of what the experts have planned. And it's what they've calculated is happening to the launcher and the satellites.
La propulsion bloc I est nominale.
The propulsion's normal. So basically what they do is they take all the information, all the data and all the schedule of events that is based on extremely accurate predictions, dedicated. I didn't get a chance to read it. If he puts it up again, I shall translate it for you. They put all of that into the computer, which then generates these images for us and allows us to visualize what's happening up there in space. Because, of course, what happens in space is something we can't actually see with our own cameras.
Les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
We lifted off from the pad 6 minutes and 52 seconds ago. It was a spectacular launch. The 4 O3b satellites lifted off in style in their first-class compartment with their seatbelts on board the 22nd Soyuz launch vehicle to lift off from this pad here, the dedicated pad at the Guiana Space Centre.
Acquisition de la télémesure pour la station de Natal au Brésil.
We are now entered into the tracking zone of the Natal ground station. The range operations manager has just confirmed that Natal have picked us up, so you can see it there. It's on the northeastern coast of Brazil. The tracking stations, often known as downrange stations. The range is the spaceport, but also all the other associated buildings across the planet which pick up the signal as we fly over. And this allows us to track what the launch is doing in real time, but also to check afterwards, make an evaluation. And Soyuz, for Soyuz, the flight data from the rocket does go via Moscow first to be validated. Sometimes it can take a little time for us to get confirmations. But we're seeing key moments happening at the scheduled time. Telemetry is also known as telematics. Telemetry, of course, being the name for the process of sending the signal to the tracking stations. We use telemetry. And it's a technology which allows measurements to be taken from far away. It actually comes from the Greek, tele, which means remote, like television or telemedicine, medicine from a distance, and metron meaning measure, so measurement from a distance. It's used in a lot of industries, oil and gas, for example, medicine, healthcare, mining. So this is the scheduled separation now of the third stage, and that's what it looks like up there.
Séparation frégate.
And we have that confirmed by the range operations manager. We've separated the third stage, and we are getting close now to the next phase of the journey where the upper stage will take the wheel. It's preparing to switch its engine on. This is called the pre-burn phase, giving a quick burst of acceleration. You can't really see it, but it's pushing the fluids back into the tanks. And that's to make sure that there is enough propellant to ignite the engine properly. It's a bit like when you press the accelerator in the car and you suddenly speed up and you get pushed back against the seat. This is the scheduled time then for Frigate to switch its engine on for the first burn. Its job being to deliver our satellites to their drop-off point in space. So we're going to find out more now about our 4 satellites.
I'm Véronique Loisel, and I'm the Program Director at Arianespace. For this program, my work mainly consists in interfacing with our customer, SES, for all subjects linked to technical matters, but also contractual, communication, financial, insurance, and legal aspects. Our job is to respond at best at our customers' requests. This launch comes after the 4 first Soyuz STB launches dedicated to the deployment of O3b constellation, successfully performed also from French Guiana since June 2013. Assembled on a specific dispenser under the fairing, the 4 new Ka-band satellites would join SES' existing constellation of 16 MEO satellites orbiting at approximately 8,000 kilometers from Earth. The in-orbit service provides an enhanced internet connectivity with fiber equivalent performance and high capacity for data solution management. These 4 O3b satellites have been manufactured by Thales Alenia Space as the previous ones. And now I would like to introduce you with Tim Gore, the O3b F5 Deputy Mission Director. Tim, could you provide us with some explanation on O3b satellites and the mission of this constellation?
Sure. As the only operationally and commercially proven non-geostationary satellite orbit broadband constellation, the O3b MEO system has been successful since its first launch in 2013. The unique high-throughput O3b constellation has been imperative in helping SES achieve its bold vision of changing lives by connecting people. Its proven impact can be felt by customers operating in nearly 50 countries today. Located 8,000 kilometers from the Earth, the O3b MEO constellation is the only low-latency, fiber-like connectivity provider for fixed data, mobility, and government markets. Seamless capability of the constellation means that the additional satellites will enhance coverage across the globe and enable SES networks to provide greater service availability and reliability to cater to the increasing demand for networked applications in the government, telecom, cloud, maritime, and energy markets. The 4 satellites launched today are the last batch of O3b satellites to join our first-generation MEO fleet. It also marks the transition to our next-gen MEO system, the highly anticipated launch of O3b mPOWER in 2021. And once in service, O3b mPOWER will transform the market yet again.
Thank you for these explanations, Tim. We will see us again slightly before the first spacecraft separation.
Great. Looking forward to it.
And now I would like to take the opportunity to thank Thales Alenia Space for their great job, for their excellent work during the complete program. And let me also express my gratitude, of course, to our renowned customer, SES, for their continuous confidence for more than 30 years.
Indeed. And during that film, we were scheduled to pick up the signal at the tracking station in Ascension Island, which is a volcanic outcrop in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We're heading out across the pond towards the west coast of Africa. The SES team's here, smiling. And Ascension Island used to be a stopover during the early days of commercial airlines. Indeed, NASA had a communications dish there. That was during the space race in the mid-1900s. I think that it was used to track the Apollos. So it's played an important role over the years. So the frigate upper stage was scheduled to switch its engine off, and once an engine is switched off, the next phase of a flight starts. It's called the ballistic phase. Ballistic means travelling without propulsion. So a spacecraft or a launcher has to be travelling high enough and fast enough to cruise without the engine, and that saves on propellant and helps to optimize the conditions of the flight. O3b switched on services in September 2014, and since then the constellation has grown from strength to strength.
In 2009, SES's investment in the O3b Medium Earth Orbit, or MEO constellation, marked a new venture into non-geostationary satellites. This pioneering move disrupted the traditional satellite market and established SES's vision to connect the underserved on a global scale. Vision became reality in 2013 with the first MEO satellites launch.
And here today in the jungles of French Guiana, we launched O3b. For the last few years, our life at O3b has been about building stuff. From today, that all changes. From today, our business is about our customer's company, and we aspire to be the team that you choose to work with.
Ever since, the O3b constellation has delivered against its bold vision. Today, the O3b system delivers to nearly 50 countries around the world.
And now if you go to the DRC or to South Sudan or to Chad or to the Amazon or large parts of the Pacific, what you see is people connected to the internet, connected to the world's marketplace and the world's universities, connected to the world's health systems. We've had a dramatic impact.
Prime Minister in his speech yesterday made the comment that APEC was the most important thing that's happened in PNG in the years since independence in 1975.
We had the responsibility to ensure that we were able to provide seamless connectivity to the visiting leaders, the media.
We basically needed a turnkey solution: supply, install, commission, and then support through APEC, and we got all of those things from SES.
On a utilisé la DSL, on s'est rabattu aussi sur la 3G parfois pour pouvoir nous soulager, mais bon, la connexion n'était pas toujours satisfaisante à notre goût. Alors avec cette station qui a été installée sur le territoire régional, nous avons un service qui a une qualité sincèrement irréprochable. Avec cette station O3b, cet outil qui vient s'ajouter donc à tout l'arsenal juridique qu'on a et tout, va nous permettre bien sûr de chercher des plateformes pour une e-gouvernance au niveau de la región.
Gracias a la solución que implementamos de O3b MEO, pues Entel hoy en día brinda a todos sus usuarios 4G en su red.
Hoy día en Iquitos los clientes pueden experimentar velocidades de bajada de datos de 10 megabits por segundo, así como lo pueden experimentar acá en Lima.
SES, as partners, they cover 99% of the world's population with their satellite constellations, all in service to the guest, because it's all about the guest experience.
The O3b system has already transformed our customers' businesses and their end users' lives.
This launch is a really exciting and important one for us at SES, and also one that marks a very important point in the O3b journey. It marks the last 4 satellites in the first generation system of O3b, but it's also a massive introduction to the next generation O3b Empower, where we've taken the proven aspects of O3b and we've scaled it ridiculously to bring that same capability, affordable, plentiful bandwidth any place on the planet.
With O3b Empower, we are now taking this proven model to the next level.
And today's 4 O3b satellites will mean that Arianespace will have launched 61 satellites for their friends at SES. So we've had several confirmations. The Range Operations Manager confirmed we had indeed switched off our engine on the frigate upper stage, and we also picked up the signal at the tracking station in Libreville, which is in Gabon on the west coast of Africa. Western Central Africa, in fact. Apparently in the port city on the Como River, which is near the Gulf of Guinea. And I believe that the tracking station has been there since 1994. Apparently the German Space Agency set up there. So the O3b satellites have clever technology.
In an empowered world, you are free. Free to bring loved ones along on distant voyages. observe, protect, and enable rapid response with life-saving communication. Streamline operations in real time, no matter the location. Bring cloud services and content to new, uncharted markets. With global coverage and low latency performance, you're free to follow opportunities anywhere. O3b mPOWER, engineering freedom.
Début des manœuvres d'orientation avant le deuxième allumage frégate.
So the range operations manager is telling us that everything's going normally. We have now started the next maneuver. Frigate is getting ready to switch its engine back on again. So this is pre-burn number 2. And it will be giving another burst of acceleration. It uses small thrusters from the attitude control system to push those fluids back into the tanks. So it means that the feed lines are full of fluid. It's very essential if the engine is to ignite properly. And you can see there the 4 satellites attached, lovingly built by the men and women at Thales Alenia Space, who are experts at this kind of thing. Trajectory, top right-hand side. We climbed steeply into space and plateaued out a bit. We're getting ready to start climbing again, and this is the scheduled moment for us to switch our engine on in order to help us to pick up speed now. Everything's functioning normally. So this is the second burn, and we've been hearing about the satellites being in MEO, that's medium Earth orbit. But for anybody who's not very familiar with the different types of orbit, I thought we might have a little chat about them. So there's 3 primary types of orbit, and there's others as well, but these are the main ones. There's low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, and geostationary orbit. So low Earth orbit is closest to the planet. It's up to about 2,000 kilometers approximately, and often weather satellites or Earth observation satellites are in this orbit, and the International Space Station as well, which is why they get such great images of our planet. There's the Thales Alenia Space team here, Rémi Le Tuc. They've done some great work building these satellites, which are highly sophisticated. And Robert Carpentier from Thales Alenia Space. So at the opposite extreme is geostationary orbit, and these guys and girls at Thales Alenia Space are expert in building all these kinds of satellites for all these different kinds of orbits. And geostationary orbit is 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. Most of the telecoms satellites are in this orbit. It's 1/10 of the way to the moon, so it's a long way away. And then MEO, which is our orbit, where our satellites are going today, is medium Earth orbit, and that can be up to, I think roughly about 20,000 kilometers above Earth. Ours are going to 8,000 kilometers. And some of the other satellites in that orbit are the positioning systems like Galileo and GPS, GLONASS, which is the Russian positioning system, some observation satellites. We do have some science missions in that orbit as well. And it's very useful because it means that for the O3b satellites, it can reduce the latency. Now, when the O3b teams decided they wanted to connect billions of people with high-speed internet from space, they needed an expert industrial partner, and they found it in Thales Alenia Space, who have built all the satellites right from the beginning. Indeed, the men and women at Thales Alenia Space, as I have said, are very experienced at building constellations. They are world leaders in the field, and they've been developing very, very advanced technology. Indeed, this is a real effort of teamwork. We always say that in space it's about teamwork, but it really is, because these industrial consortia are made of many, many different industries, all contributing down to the tiniest and most vital screw. So Thales Space drew on their expertise to create innovative technology for O3b.
The O3b journey started back in 2013, paving the way for broadband constellations. It's only now, 9 years later, that we fully realize what a decisive moment the O3b constellation journey represented for the whole satellite industry. No one could imagine at that time that this project would be such a precursor in the broadband market. Thales Arianespace is so proud of being part of the O3b exciting project from the very beginning. The launch of this 5th batch will augment the constellation, and these 4 new satellites will provide even more capacity, flexibility, and reliability to O3b's customers. At Thales Arianespace, we are delighted of our outstanding partnership with O3b teams, and we value the special relationship we have developed over the years. This resulted in a high-performance satellites constellation offering communications and internet connectivity services at a fiber-like speed across the globe. I am convinced that this joint amazing journey will continue in the future. Today is important for all of us, and most of all for SES networks, who are continually expanding their business. My congratulations to all my teams for their enthusiasm and great job during these years, and my warmest thanks to SES for their continuous confidence in Thales Arianespace.
We're being tracked at the moment by the Malindi tracking station on the east coast of Africa. And after today, Arianespace will have launched 159 satellites built by Thales Arianespace, just under half of those for constellations. And there are 7 more in the order book, so that means there are 7 more Thales Arianespace satellites to be launched with Arianespace. So yes, I was just saying Malindi on the east coast of Africa. So our flight path's taking us out now towards Southeast Asia, so we should have been heading out across the Indian Ocean now. And it's going to take us over some very beautiful islands, the Seychelles and the Maldives, and down across Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, out across the South Pacific, and then back towards the northwest coast of South America. We will have done a lap. O3b really is a truly pioneering project. They've broken the mold. Broken the mold in many ways, and he was just telling us that all the systems on board are functioning normally, so that's good to hear. Just to top right-hand side of your screen, you can see we're really climbing into space now. Look at our altitude going up. We've travelled nearly 11,000 kilometres across the planet if we were travelling on, as the crow flies, on Earth. And our speed has really picked up. We're coming up to 9 kilometres per second. Well, at the moment, 38, 39. And you can see our flight path on the right-hand side of the screen. There we are, heading out across the equator. We often take broadband for granted, don't we? I don't know about you. A lot of people sort of don't realise that, of course, broadband it's a real privilege. And now that privilege is extending to people living in the equatorial regions thanks to the O3b satellites, which have delivered high-speed broadband to many, many people who would not have had it otherwise. And Arianespace, I have to say, I think I speak for them when I say that they're really delighted to play a role in helping to reduce that digital divide and launching all of the satellites in the constellation. Getting closer now to our scheduled ballistic phase. Coasting without the engine again. That's in about a minute's time. Ballistics is interesting. It's the science of mechanics that deals with the launching, flight, behavior, and effects of projectiles. So a ballistic missile is a missile guided only during the brief initial powered phase of the flight. And that's what's happened here. We've used power and then we've been able to switch the engine off because we're onto our orbit. And after the missile has switched its engine off, the trajectory is governed by the laws of classical mechanics, otherwise known as Newtonian mechanics. Because it was Newton who discovered them. And I believe, I'm not a scientist, but I believe that when we talk about the ballistic phase, we're talking about Newton's first law. And that says that if there's no external force, so if there's no pushing or gravity or any sort of power, then things that are stopped will stay stopped, and things that are moving will stay moving. And that's what happens despite switching off the engine. We keep moving. It's clever stuff, eh? Really climbing into space now. We've climbing to an altitude of 363 kilometers. And this was 33 minutes ago, lifting off from the pad. Saw the swing arms push away. If you look at the top right-hand side, you can see we did a bit of what we call a roller coaster. So we lifted off, we increased our altitude, we climbed into the sky, then we plateaued out a bit, and now we're really, really climbing higher. What actually happened was we ended up flying a little bit closer to Earth, which is why we dropped our altitude, in order to get onto the correct orbit. And we'll see later how that works, because we are on an elliptical orbit at the moment. That's an orbit the shape of an egg. So we're going to take a break now because we're in the ballistic phase. That's going to last for about an hour, just over an hour. And we will be coming back to you in just over an hour to pick up our show. And we shall see you back here. Hello and welcome back. We are 1 hour rather, and 38 minutes into the launch of the next 4 satellites for the O3b Constellation. And right now they are riding bareback on what's left of the upper stage of the launch vehicle, the Soyuz launch vehicle, heading towards their destination. Let's take a little look at the story so far. They lifted off from the pad here at the Guiana Space Centre on the northeastern coast of South America, Amazonia, the equatorial launch zone for Europe, and they were flying on board VS22, Vol Soyuz 22, the 22nd Russian launch vehicle Soyuz to lift off from its home here at the pad at the Guiana Space Centre. And we were very lucky because it was a really beautiful launch. When we were looking at the weather forecast a few days ago, rain was predicted, but today it was clear. We lost the boosters and the fairing, and then the next parts of the launcher were jettisoned, and the upper stage then switched on its engine after the 3rd stage was jettisoned. The frigate upper stage switched its engine on and transferred us to the next phase of the orbit. We switched off, heading out over the equatorial regions. Switched on for a second boost. That's our flight path, you can see it there. Heading towards South Point in Hawaii right now. Then we switched the engine off again, and we've been coasting without the engine since then, for what we call a ballistic phase, which is a coast phase, for roughly an hour, 1 hour and 20 minutes. So frigate is propelling our satellites now towards their separation orbit, and we should be getting there in about 18 minutes' time. I am here in the Mission Control Centre with a very special guest who we are really delighted to have with us. J.P. Hemingway is the CEO of SES Networks, and JP is also, it so happens, an expert in data and the internet. So if you have any questions for him afterwards, he's the man to ask about how the internet works. JP, well, obviously we all know what the internet means to us, but what does the internet mean to you?
Well, Katie, we believe the internet is a basic right. It's basically connecting people to the content they love to see, or people to businesses. And we talk about a lot of the explosion of data, and we talk about that in maybe London or New York, and that's all well and good, but that should be everywhere. And if you recall what O3b originally stood for, it was reaching the other 3 billion who don't have good quality connection to the internet. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that same experience and deliver it across the entire planet. And that's something we really, really believe in.
And as you say, O3b at the time was about connecting the other 3 billion. Of course, the population's grown a lot since then. But you launched your first satellites in 2013, and the O3b constellation and latterly SES Networks has been really pioneering, and we heard it earlier in the programme. Now we're launching, well, if all goes well today, we'll have 20.
That's right.
How's it been going?
Well, it's been quite the journey. I mean, we set out 10 years ago now. I can't believe it's 10 years ago, with a really bold vision, really trying to change what people should expect from satellite, what satellite can fundamentally do, the quality of experience that you should expect from satellite. So we had to prove a few things. We had to prove the technology. We had to prove we could launch a constellation and that we could track those satellites as we've seen today. We could get them into a nice constellation and ultimately add more into that constellation, add more capacity, because once we got it into the world, they wanted more. That was the main thing. So we have to prove a few things. Technology, absolutely done. Then we had to prove that we could operationally make it work. Ultimately, could we deliver high-quality services with lower delays of signals, better latency, so that everyone had the same experience, again, as in New York, as if we're in the heart of Africa. So we proven the technology, proven the operations, but ultimately proven that it's commercially viable. At the end of the day, we need to be able to scale this, keep it sustainable. So that's the final thing we've done, is really make it absolutely sustainable as a model. And that's what we've done. But the biggest thing is you've got this bold vision. It's the proven impact And what does that mean is the customers we have with us today and those around the world, it's about what have they done with these services? What have they managed to change? I give a couple of examples, perhaps. We tend to split our market up into certain segments. So we have what we call the fixed data. These are the telecommunications companies, the mobile network operators. We all talk about 4G and LTE. I get very annoyed when I walk to somewhere else and it suddenly disappears to 2G or something. But that's the reality in large parts of the world. So we've used our MEO constellation to deliver high-speed broadband internet into countries and locations, whether they be remote locations in Africa or Latin America or on ships, so they can have the same experience using 3G and 4G as if they were in the classic London, New Yorks, etc. So that's the telco side. We've also done great things with the governments of the world, and I particularly love the work we do with the humanitarian side of the governments. So, for example, in Africa, we've helped deploy connectivity to all of these peacekeeping missions. They rely on huge logistics, getting thousands of people with the supplies they need and keeping them safe. We've doubled the number of sites in Africa from 10 to 20. And that means that all of these sites have the seamless logistics system so that everybody is supplied well and ultimately kept safe. So these are two segments that have been really, really popular for us in the last sort of 5 years or so. And the last example I gave is maybe in the maritime market. People talk about this a lot, and it is an important part of our business. These cruise ships, the very largest ships, these are floating cities. There are 5, 6, 7,000 people on these ships, and they used to share a tiny amount of bandwidth. And now they're sharing the same experiences you have at home on the ship. So it's really disrupted the whole market and challenged what people should expect that satellite can achieve. So that's what's been keeping us busy for the last 5 years.
Certainly very busy, and
Yes.
of course you're really literally transforming lives. But, so we've been talking about your satellites in what we call MEO, which is medium Earth orbit, but SES has satellites in geostationary orbit as well, much further away from the Earth. What's the difference?
It's a great question. And I'd probably start by saying they're great in combination. So we like to have the geostationary and the medium Earth orbit. And maybe here's an example I'd say why. I tend to think about, if you imagine the globe on maybe your desk at home and you've got a flashlight or a torch and you're very far away with your geostationary satellites, it illuminates a large part of the globe. You can see a large space, lots of users, lots of cell towers, lots of ships, lots of aircraft. So it's very, very good at reaching lots of people with a good amount of data, but it's all about the reach. But as you come closer in, think of bringing that flashlight closer in, the beam gets slightly smaller, but it really focuses the amount of energy you have on that little spot of the globe. That means you can get very high throughput, much lower latency, which is better quality of experience. So it's that real combination of super high throughput, medium Earth orbit delivered capabilities in combination with the geostationary. And what's really neat is when we have individual users that maybe need latency sensitive signals, whether it's video or video conferencing, that needs this low latency medium Earth orbit, and we can route traffic to that particular satellite. If you want to do web browsing or something that's not quite so important, you'll route that traffic up to the geostationary services. So that flexibility to route the right application to the right satellite infrastructure is incredibly powerful. And we have over 70 satellites up there. It gives us incredible flexibility.
There are, though, a number of constellations, aren't there now, which are planning to really target in with that torch right into the low Earth orbit and the much smaller spots. So what makes you stand apart from them?
I think the first thing I'd say is all of this talk and the investment that's going on into these multiple constellations, whether they be other ones in geo or in the low Earth orbit, the first thing I'd say is it's good. It's good for our industry. It's good for the telecommunications industry in general. It's good for the consumers of that, because it's basically stating that satellite will be part of mainstream communications. It has to be. It has to be used with fiber, with microwave, and satellite will be mainstream. So all this is a proof point to me that it's happening. What I would say is that I don't think all of those constellations will exist. I think some are great. I think some may exist. And I don't think all of them need to exist. But to your specific question, again, you talked about bringing that torch beam even closer to the globe on your desk. It really focuses it down. So yes, you'll get good throughput. Yes, you'll get even lower latency. But think about trying to get from maybe Africa to London. And this small spot has a little bit on Africa and a little bit here, a little bit there. So if you want to get from Africa to London, you've got to go through multiple hops to get there. So ultimately, the delay will be the same. So we really think this medium Earth orbit is the sweet spot. We studied it for a long time. It's the sweet spot.
So, I mean, we've just got 30 seconds left, JP, but how are you going to keep that going, that sweet spot?
Well, we have to keep disrupting. We disrupted once. We think we've really changed what people should expect, but we're going further. So this is the last of the 20, and now we've got our Empower constellation, which takes this to exponential scale. We're going from gigabits to terabits. We're going from megabits to a site to gigabits to a site, and ultimate flexibility, thousands of beams instead of hundreds of beams. It's super scale.
Very, very exciting, and always the big vision from SES and the O3b constellation, a very pioneering constellation. JP, thank you very much. We wish you all the very best now as we progress into the next phase. And so we're going to take a film now and look at O3b, the constellation, and SES networks.
In 2009, SES's investment in the O3b Medium Earth Orbit, or MEO constellation, marked a new venture into non-geostationary satellites. This pioneering move disrupted the traditional satellite market and established SES's vision to connect the underserved on a global scale. Vision became reality in 2013 with the first MEO satellites launch.
And here today in the jungles of French Guiana, we launched O3b. For the last few years, our life at O3b has been about building stuff. From today, that all changes. From today, our business is about our customer's company, and we aspire to be the team that you choose to work with.
Ever since, the O3b constellation has delivered against its bold vision. Today, the O3b system delivers to nearly 50 countries around the world.
And now if you go to the DRC or to South Sudan or to Chad or to the Amazon or large parts of the Pacific, what you see is people connected to the internet, connected to the world's marketplace and the world's universities, connected to the world's health systems. We've had a dramatic impact.
Prime Minister in his speech yesterday made the comment that APEC was the most important thing that's happened in PNG in the years since independence in 1975.
We had the responsibility to ensure that we were able to provide seamless connectivity to the visiting leaders, the media.
We basically needed a turnkey solution: supply, install, commission, and then support through APEC, and we got all of those things from SES.
On a utilisé la DSL, on s'est rabattu aussi sur la 3G parfois pour pouvoir nous soulager, mais bon, la connexion n'était pas toujours satisfaisante à notre goût. Alors avec cette station qui a été installée sur le territoire régional, nous avons un service qui a une qualité sincèrement irréprochable. Avec cette station O3b, cet outil qui vient s'ajouter donc à tout l'arsenal juridique qu'on a et tout, va nous permettre bien sûr de chercher des plateformes pour une e-gouvernance au niveau de la région.
Gracias a la solución que implementamos de O3b MEO, pues Entel hoy en día brinda a todos sus usuarios 4G en su red.
Hoy día en Iquitos los clientes pueden experimentar velocidades de bajada de datos de 10 megabits por segundo, así como lo pueden experimentar acá en Lima.
SES, as partners, they cover 99% of the world's population with their satellite constellations, all in service to the guest, because it's all about the guest experience.
The O3b system has already transformed our customers' businesses and their end users' lives.
This launch is a really exciting and important one for us at SES, and also one that marks a very important point in the O3b journey. It marks the last 4 satellites in the first generation system of O3b, but it's also a massive introduction to the next generation O3b Empower, where we've taken the proven aspects of O3b and we've scaled it ridiculously to bring that same capability, affordable, plentiful bandwidth any place on the planet.
With O3b Empower, we are now taking this proven model to the next level.
Great shot there.
On the drone of the Jupiter Control Centre, the outside, and the launcher that you saw was not the real Ariane 5. It was a model, a 3/4 size model of Ariane 5. Our satellites getting close now to the next phase of their journey, because the frigate upper stage is scheduled to switch its engine back on again now. The scheduled moment to be confirmed by the range operations manager. And just to remind you, our confirmations come a little after the main event because the information comes from the tracking centres to both the Guiana Space Centre and Moscow for validation. So we see all the major events happen when they are scheduled to, and then we get our confirmations a wee bit later from the Range Operations Manager, who gets the information from the tracking teams here at the Guiana Space Centre, and we'll be meeting them later.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont nominaux.
He's telling us that everything on board is working normally. The teams here, SES teams, in what we call the fishbowl. Arianespace likes to engage in long-term partnerships with its customers. It's the nature of the job. And with these 4 O3b satellites, they will have launched 57 spacecraft for SES. Really impressive. In terms of the O3b constellation, some of these teams have been working alongside each other for months and others for years. And these kind of campaigns create strong bonds between people and long-term friendships, as the teams obviously have to work closely together, you know, solving problems and hopefully having some fun too. Let's go back to the program director and the mission director for Arianespace.
We are now back with Tim Gore, the O3b F5 Deputy Mission Director. Tim, we are just a few minutes before the first satellite separation. I know the involvement of SES with TAS and industries, together with Arianespace and CNES, was considerable to achieve the launch readiness of O3b satellites for VS22 Soyuz mission. Would you say the relationship between entities was a strength?
Quite definitely. This was our 5th launch campaign on the Soyuz launch vehicle with the frigate upper stage, and this was our smoothest launch campaign yet. The launch campaign was managed in a most professional and cooperative manner by our combined teams of SES, Thales, Arianespace, and CNES. The launch of these 4 satellites is a culmination of over 3 years of design and manufacturing. And I would like to thank everyone involved in getting us to this point. And special thanks goes to the families of loved ones for allowing them to support all the activities around the clock.
Could you explain in a few words what will happen from separation from launch vehicle in terms of LEOP activities?
Yes, the satellites will be injected into an orbit that is slightly lower than the operational one. Shortly after separation from the frigate, the solar array wings will be deployed. Then the satellite will perform a series of orbit-raising maneuvers to arrive at their final orbit. During this orbit-raising time, we will be testing all of the satellites and subsystems of the hardware on the satellite platform. Once they arrive at the proper orbit, we will confirm the performance of the telecommunications payload and then transfer control of the satellites to our SES operations team.
Thanks, Tim. Let's wait now for the separation of the first pair.
And there they are in the fishbowl inside the thickened glass. The Mission Control Centre has 2 sides to it, the audience on one side and the mission controllers, the operational teams, on the other. Just a reminder of what we're looking at here. This is what's left of our Soyuz launch vehicle. The gold round structure to the left is the frigate upper stage. It has spherical tanks, has tanks for propellant, and it also has avionics on board. And then attached to it with a very special device, an attachment device, a dispenser, are the 4 satellites. We're being tracked at the moment by the South Point tracking station, I believe, and we are flying across. We've flown across the equator. As you can see, that's our flight path there on the right-hand side of the screen. We travelled across the Atlantic, across Africa, across the Indian Ocean, Indonesia, across the Pacific, and tracked now by Hawaii, who is the teams there overseeing all these operations. It's called South Point because it is the southernmost point of the big island of Hawaii and, of course, of the 50 United States. I believe it's known as K-Lee or K-Lay. I'm not sure if I've pronounced that correctly. It's actually a registered historic landmark district. So the upper frigate stage scheduled there to switch its engine off. That's the scheduled moment. We launched from the northeastern tip of South America. The northeastern tip of South America in French Guiana. We had a long ballistic phase, and the frigate upper stage during that time stored all the information about its flight, and then when it arrives at the next tracking station, it generally downloads that information as a general rule to the tracking station. The teams here at the Guiana Space Centre
Confirmation de la troisième extinction frégate.
We have the confirmation there from the Range Operations Manager that the frigate upper stage has switched off its engine. And this is the CVI teams. We call them the CVI teams, so the real-time visual control. They are receiving all the telemetry coming in from the launch vehicle, and they are then sorting that information. It gives them the information about how the flight is progressing in real time, and it also means they're able to make some analysis after the flight, and they then pass that information to the Range Operations Manager for his announcements. And this is the team, our Arianespace team here at the Mission Control Center in Moscow. It's called SUP. And they are validating the information there because, as you well know, Soyuz is indeed a Russian launch vehicle. So we are now coming closer to separating our two satellites. We call it separating. What we mean is delivering them, because right now they're attached and they have to separate from the launch vehicle. If you think of it as a sophisticated taxi driver, this is the point where it'll be dropping them off and opening the doors to let them out. But it's a rather more carefully planned set of procedures. Very, very, very precise set of orientation maneuvers. I don't know if you can see some sparkles there, which might be the nozzles. The frigate upper stage has some little nozzles on it which help it to orientate. So this is the scheduled separation time for the first two satellites. We will wait for the Range Operations Manager to confirm this separation, but this is what it looks like up there. We have the two satellites. There's one coming towards us and there is one on the other side. You just can't see it right now. Moving both away from each other, diametrically opposed. We call this collision avoidance to make sure that nothing bangs into anything else. It's all very carefully planned. And of course, we still have these second two attached. So they are moving away from the mothership very carefully, very gently, despite the fact that the actual whole rest of the launcher is hurtling around the planet at 4.26 kilometers per second. Waiting now for the confirmation there of the separation of those two.
Séparation FM17 et FM18.
Okay, so we have confirmation that the first two satellites have been separated. They're now starting their life in space. They go through a whole set of maneuvers. We heard about them earlier from Mr. Gore, telling us all about what they do. Basically, they have to deploy their solar panels. They need to get energy from the sun so that they can start operating, and they need to send down their signal to their teams on the ground. The Thales Alenia space teams at the moment in charge of all these operations in the early phases the early phase of what we call LEOPS, launch and early operations. So we're going to take a break for about 8 minutes because we're going to wait for the next 2 satellites to be separated. We'll be coming back to you in about 8 minutes' time. I'm going to close the microphone now and reopen it in roughly 8 minutes. See you shortly.
Hello again and welcome back. We are live at the Guiana Space Centre, 2 hours and 11 minutes into the launch of our next two satellites left on the dispenser for the O3b satellites. We've released the first two, and now we're getting closer to the separation moment for the second two. But we've got a few films for you before we do that. Arianespace is very expert at launching constellations. We've launched a number of them. In fact, I've got some figures for you here. In the last 20 years, we've launched 109 of them. And we've created some special technology for the O3b constellation.
Hello, I am Mark Grossaich, the Vice President Soyuz Business Unit. I am in charge of the Soyuz program in Arianespace, more precisely responsible of the coordination of the Soyuz activities. I am also interfacing with our Russian partners. We are now about to place into orbit 4 more satellites for SES O3b. It is the 5th launch of the benefit of SES O3b, representing almost a quarter of the Soyuz launches performed from CSG so far. On top of offering a highly reliable launch solution, proven by more than 1,900 Soyuz launches, Arianespace was chosen by O3b for its team's ability to work on complex projects such as launch of constellations. Soyuz launch vehicle fitting to constellation needs has been already demonstrated with more than 15 launches performed for O3b and other constellations programs. The frigate upper stage versatility associated with the dedicated dispenser allowed to perfectly answer to O3b missions requirements.
As part of the Payload Environment and Interfaces Department, I ensure the verification of the compatibility of VS22 payloads with the operational environment experienced on this Soyuz launch. Further, the Payload Environment and Interfaces Department assures the supply of spacecraft launcher interfaces with respect to the specific mission characteristics and programs, as well as the development of structures in interface with the spacecraft. For O3b Networks constellation, a dedicated dispenser structure as spacecraft-to-launcher interface was developed. Dispenser systems are used for multiple satellite launches, especially suitable for constellations such as O3b Networks. The development, led by Arianespace and entrusted to Ariane Group, started in 2009 for the first launch of O3b Networks on Soyuz from CSG in 2013. The O3b dispenser is the equipped structure mated on the Soyuz launch vehicle and carrying 4 O3b network satellites during ground and flight operations up to separation. The major parts of the O3b dispenser are the structure subsystem, the separation subsystem, and the electrical harness. The structure subsystem is designed to transfer ground and flight loads between the spacecraft and the launch vehicle. The upper part interfaces with the 4 satellites, whereas the lower cone provides transition to a lower frame where the dispenser structure is bolted to frigate, the launch vehicle upper stage. The separation subsystem, through which each of the 4 O3b satellites is attached to the O3b dispenser, mainly composed of a hold-on and a release system and pushers, enabling to firmly hold the satellites during ground and flight operations and to release them when ordered by the launch vehicle. The electrical harness consists in umbilical lines to each spacecraft, harness to the pyrotechnical initiators for spacecraft separation, as well as an instrumentation harness. We are looking forward to future cooperations with our customers, as with our component suppliers, such as Ariane Group, in the development of dedicated spacecraft-to-launcher interfaces.
This VS22 mission is the 4th Soyuz launch performed from CSG within 5 months, which is a track record for this launch system since its debut here in 2011. It demonstrates our ability with our Russian partners to achieve a high launch rate for the benefit of our customers. It also paves the way for the challenging period to come, with the objective to perform 20 Soyuz launches within 2 years. Going above Soyuz, our actual family of launch vehicles is at the service of constellations. Arianespace has now launched 113 satellites through 30 launches with Ariane, Soyuz and Vega. Looking at the future, the next generation of European launchers developed by Ariane Group and Avio under ESA responsibility will be smartly adapted to the growing demand on the constellation market.
Non, Jean. So you can see there that there's innovation really at every level. Innovation for creating the satellites, from Thales Alenia Space, innovation from Arianespace for the teams, the engineering teams who've created that wonderful dispenser, and innovation for all the teams on the ground as well. Now, Arianespace has 3 launch vehicles, as you may well know, where we can take any satellite to any orbit. And for this one, we have used the frigate upper stage for 3 burns. We're going to find out why now.
Frigate performs 3 boosts to reach the separation orbit. The first 2 boosts are carried out respectively above the Atlantic Ocean and above equatorial Africa to get to an elliptical transfer orbit. At that moment, an 80 minutes coasting phase starts in order to reach the apogee at 7,800 kilometers. During this ballistic phase, most of the time, the 4 spacecraft stack is spun slowly at 1 degree per second around its longitudinal axis. By this way, we balance the thermal load during sun exposure. That's why we call it barbecue mode. Then the third boost converts the elliptical orbit into the circular one targeted for the spacecraft separation. This is done above the Pacific Ocean. Once the first pair of spacecraft is separated, frigate completes a coast phase and a short burn to ensure a correct distancing between the 2 pairs of spacecraft. The separations will be visible from South Point Station.
So some technical information there, and useful to know. And for anybody who's unaware of an elliptical orbit and an apogee and perigee, an elliptical orbit is like an egg shape, and the apogee, I think I'm right in saying, is the furthest away, and the perigee being the sort of closest. So we got closer to Earth as we went on that elliptical orbit. Now, we were saying that Arianespace has launched 109 constellation satellites in 20 years. Let's look back now at some of those.
She doesn't like sugar, so why'd you say the sweetness makes the lover? And then you told her she reminds you of your mother. And she doesn't like butter, so why'd you slime around under those covers, melting through her hands and down the gutter? She's not biting 'cause she don't like it when it's red. She's not feeding 'cause you keep bleeding over her. You talk about the things you must discover, the cannibal that lies inside the lover. She's not biting 'cause she don't like it when it's red.
quite an array of launch vehicles there. Those were the three main ones, but with their different versions. So Ariane 5, the heavy lifter, Soyuz we're using today, the medium lifter, and Vega, the baby of the family. Just like the three bears. Mummy bear, daddy bear, and baby bear. Look at the top right-hand side of your screen, and you can see that we were climbing into space, and we've plateaued out because we're on our orbit. We're not climbing anymore. Our altitude, 7,836 kilometers. This is our separation altitude, the separation moment here for the next two satellites, but we will of course wait as always for our range operations manager to confirm that. But that's what it looks like. The other two, we're getting a better angle on it this time round because we can actually see both of them and how they move away in that diametrically opposed position. And you can also see now what's left of the launch vehicle, which is the frigate upper stage, with the dispenser in the middle, that tube that we could see back there. Now, we're waiting for a couple of things because we need the range operations manager to confirm to us that our satellites are indeed separated. And we also then want to find out if all is going well in space. And so the teams on the ground will be waiting for a signal from the satellites. Basically, they need to call home.
Confirmation de la séparation des satellites O3b, FM19 et FM20.
Well, that's great news. So we have separation confirmed. The launcher has done its job and the frigate upper stage has done its job of delivering our satellites to their position in space. So now what we need, we're going to just relive the launch and remember what this was like. We lifted off from the pad here, not quite an hour and a half ago, 2.5 hours ago, but nearly. It really was great. We were so lucky because we thought it was going to rain and it didn't. And actually, look at that, the sky was really rather clear. There's some clouds around, but we did manage to see it coming out the other side of the clouds. Everybody watching that in real life outside, not on the screens, but here in Mission Control, but on the viewing stations, will have sensed and felt that huge rumble and power as she flew out over the Atlantic Ocean. See the swing arms, how they pulled away. And we got a great view of the rocket flying out there into the sky here above the Guiana Space Centre, out over the ocean next to the Amazon rainforest. And there you can get a really good view of that rainforest. On the left is a model, a 3/4 size model of the Ariane 5 launcher. That's the biggest launcher, not the Soyuz that we used today. And these are the teams inside that building. Each one of those teams has their own desk. You can see, I'm going to wave. Let's see if you can see me waving in the commentary box right up at the back of the Mission Control Centre, right at the top, at the back of above the audience. I'll wave again. You can see me there with my screen. And then we have the VIP guests, and here at the forefront we can see all the operational teams. Now waiting for the signal from the satellites, waiting for them to call home and give us a health check. It's the teams at the South Point tracking station in Hawaii who are listening out for the satellites to call home. Shout out to you guys and girls who are focusing really hard now. This is you're in action at this moment. And a big shout out to all the teams actually in all the tracking stations
because everybody works really hard there. They are dotted along the equator for this flight. Those tracking stations with their big dishes, listening out, watching out, hearing out, sensing out for our rocket as it flies over, for it to send its data and its signal down to those tracking stations. So the first 2 satellites were released some time ago, and we presume and hope that they are going through their deployment operations, because that is supposed to start soon after separation. Interestingly, the solar panels, when they deploy, they have a couple of functions. Well, primarily, obviously, they are there to capture the sun's rays and convert that into electricity so that the satellites can power up and start going through their initial checks and operations. But they also actually help the satellites to stop tumbling. Because when the satellites are released, they're pushed away from the dispenser at 0.5 kilometre per second, and that's to help them, to prevent them from colliding. So we saw that when we saw the computer-generated images of the satellites moving away. 0.5 kilometre per second. It didn't look fast, did it? but you know, 0.5 kilometre per second, in my book, still pretty fast, even though it looked very slow and gentle. But then the imbalance of pushing them off can cause them to tumble. So once the solar panels open, that helps to stabilize them. It's a little bit like if you were walking on a tightrope and you put your arms out. Although solar panels, of course, are flat panels, whereas our arms don't have quite as much stabilizing effect as a solar panel. But there are also, after that, small thrusters on board the spacecraft that bring the tumbling under control. And that's all very carefully thought through and planned. I think I understood that it's going to take 3 days for the satellites to get to Earth pointing mode. They have to point towards the Earth so that they can beam signals down to us. So the teams at Thales Alenia Space at the moment, in charge of all the in-orbit testing that we're talking about here, the launch and early operations phase, or LEOPS, as it's known in the trade. They are based, well, they have various different centres, but Thales Alenia Space, one of Europe's aerospace giants, very, very experienced in building and operating constellations and, building operational constellations.
Confirmation du succès de la mission VS22.
And we have confirmation that the mission is a success. The satellites have called home. We've received the signal. Big slaps on the back. Everybody who has worked so hard for today can feel extremely proud of themselves. Here's the SES teams and the Thales Alenia Space teams having their photo taken, and some big smiles there. That's a great feeling. A job well done. There's the range operations manager there who's been calling out all those milestones, keeping us all informed with what's happening, and the mission director, the chef de mission, as we call it in French. It looks like there's a new tradition here with hats. I like it. Very useful here on the equator where the sun beams down. I suspect everyone's going to have their photographs taken with a hat on. Waiting now for the official speeches to start. Luce Fabregat from Arianespace will take the floor, along with some of the other key players from the customers. There's Luce there now, looking very happy. She's been working alongside all these teams now for some time. These teams all know each other well. They've, as I said earlier in the broadcast, spent many months, many years working together. So for some people, the job's just finishing, but for others, it's just beginning, because for the teams in the control centres, now they are taking on their babies, flying their satellites, taking them through their early operations, checking them, making sure they're all in working order, taking them through the deployment operations so that they can then start the process of beaming down the services and giving us all here on Earth super fast broadband, high-speed internet. And then for other teams, they're still continuing. Certainly the CVI team, the real-time visual control team, who we saw earlier, the tracking centre here at the Guiana Space Centre, they have to stay and continue because they are overseeing all the next operations for the frigate upper stage, because we have to put that into its graveyard orbit and deorbit it, and that's going to take a little time, so they will be keeping an eye on all of those operations. Now waiting for these guys now to take the floor and come and do the official speeches. They have to walk through from this, what we call the fishbowl here inside the glass. They have to go through a heavy security system, so it always takes a few minutes for them to get there. Looks like Luce is saying, shall we head up there now? Quick selfie before we go. Let's make sure everyone's in. Nice picture. So they're making their way now. They're walking out through the security system and through the corridors to come to the other side of the protected glass. This is very special glass that we're looking at here. It's extra thick and security glass. In fact, when you tap on it, when you're on the other side, which is where I was standing earlier, the men and women inside absolutely cannot hear you, can't hear the tapping. So it's also soundproofed to make sure that everyone can concentrate hard. I think it's a good feeling for all these people. This is a job well done. I'm sure that some of these teams will want to relax tonight and congratulate each other. So the camera's there waiting for Luce Fabregat and our other speakers to take the floor. I see that JP Hemingway is already, and Luce is coming through, so we'll close our mics now and listen to Luce Fabregat.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Arianespace is delighted to announce that the 4 O3b satellites have been safely separated as planned on their targeted mission, medium Earth orbit. For our 4th launch of the year, the second with our medium-weight vehicle Soyuz. Success is here for our customers and our partners. Congratulations to all of you. The 4 satellites aboard this Soyuz flight are the 17th to 20th O3b payloads orbited by Arianespace since 2013. This rises to 61, the total number of satellites launched by Arianespace for SES since 1984. Well done. So we are very proud to have delivered one more time for SES, the first global satellite operator to propose a differentiated and scalable GEO-MEO offering worldwide. With the O3b satellites positioned at around 8,000 kilometers on the equatorial plane, thus more than 4 times closer to the Earth and geostationary satellites, Arianespace is honored to support SES Network's ambition to provide low latency and fiber-like connectivity. Today's launch follows the O3b constellation deployment launches of 2013, 2014, 2 in 2014 in fact, and 1 last year, enabling commercial service since September 2014. We are proud to have launched your 20 satellites of this first phase of the constellation. Mission accomplished. For this long-lasting relation, let me express my profound gratitude to SES Network CEO, John Paul Hemingway, who honors us with his presence today, and also to the SES Network CTO, Ray Pinto, who is also here with us today. Thanks to both of you. Congratulations also to our long-standing partner, Thales Arianespace, who built the 4 satellites aboard this flight. They pile up for a total of 159 Thales Arianespace produced satellites orbited since 1981 by Arianespace. With 7 more in our backlog, we will certainly continue to partner for many other common successes. Many thanks to you, Thales Arianespace, for your trust. And more specifically to you, Rémi Letuc, Executive VP Telecom, who is also with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, this 4th flight of the year brings to 22 the number of missions performed from here, from the European Spaceport, with our medium-weight vehicle since its introduction here in 2011. I would like to express my gratitude to our Russian partners, Roscosmos, RKC Progress, NPO Lavochkin, and Tenki for their cooperation. We managed to perform together 4 Soyuz launches in less than 5 months, so really congratulations to everyone for this performance. Let me also congratulate the European teams who, alongside our Russian partners, have greatly contributed to today's success. Our ground contractors here in French Guiana, and our daily partner with the CNES CSG team. And of course, let me also pay my tribute to my Arianespace and StarSem colleagues for this latest success, for their outstanding professionalism and their commitments to our customers. Now, I would like to welcome to the stage our customers and partners. And first, you, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks for the kind words. I could start by talking about the fact that our industry is going through change, but I'm not going to bother you with that. Here is a moment of celebration, and I would like to thank various teams and a lot of people that worked hard, quite frankly, for years to reach this stage here.
And I'm going to fall into that trap of mentioning a few names and forgetting some others, and you're going to pardon me for that. First, as you mentioned, 61 launches. I also made a calculation last night with Geoffroy that's probably slight over 10% of your total launches over Arianespace's lifetime, if you allow me to call it that way. That's a mean achievement, a great accomplishment, and we are very grateful to Arianespace for working with us throughout all those years, and I'm sure continuing to work with us in the next generation of launch services that are coming around the corner. Some people helped on this particular launch. Veronique, which is somewhere, was indefatigable in just bringing this to a conclusion. Dave, the whole Arianespace team that helped us throughout the launch campaign and bringing this to a successful launch. Thank you very much to all of you. I'd like to also thank the Guiana Space Centre, the team under Didier, which, Didier and I worked together in the past, and it was a pleasure to meet him and his team here. They make this whole complex logistics operations happen, and we are very grateful to them for their help. Of course, I have to mention as well our Russian partners. They delivered again, and all our 20 satellites were launched successfully on Soyuz rockets. We have to recognize that they have been part and parcel of this endeavor. Going on along those lines, I would like to thank Thales. They have been through thick and thin on this program. We all know that, and they delivered, and we are very appreciative of that. Jérôme and his team, the team in Cannes that right now is busy and started already trying to acquire the sun and bring the thrusters online, and I'm sure to help us bring those satellites into commercial service as soon as possible. And of course, I have to thank the SES team. There are a lot of people, some of us have moved on, but there are a lot of people that devoted blood, sweat, and tears at SES for making this happen. Tim Gore and the team here, the teams back in Manassas, Betzdorf, and other locations, all of them are rightfully proud of the achievement that we made tonight. This brings us nearer to a conclusion, and a successful conclusion at that. And finally, last but definitely not least, I would like to thank those without them this would not happen. Our customers. They use our services, they make this possible. Customers first, and I would like us all to remember that. And I'm very grateful for those of you that could come here and join us in this celebration. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me hand over to JP, my partner in crime, for a few words as well.
Thanks, Drew. Wow. That's all I can say. Incredibly exciting day to see this happen. You can see that we've donned the party hats because we've spoken to all of our newborn babies up in the sky, and we're pretty happy that they're answering back. I won't repeat everything that Rui said. I want to just extend and double up the thanks to all of the partners that we've had in this exploit to get us to this point. This is an incredible milestone to have 20 of these NGSO groundbreaking satellites up there delivering service, as we said, for our customers, which is what this is all about. So I talked before about proving, and maybe you think before with Steve Collar, who's the group CEO, who I know was desperate to be here, but he had our AGM today, so he had other duties. So the pleasure is mine, unfortunately, Steve. But he said in the speech earlier on the video, he said, look, the first few years are about building these things. The next few years are about our customers. And I think we've worked exceptionally well with our customers. They've used our technology to disrupt their own markets, and I can't wait for the next phase of disruption. So it closes the chapter on this one, but we're already ready for the next one. So I can't wait for the next generation of our technology to come out. And again, a huge thank you for everyone who put, as you said, blood, sweat, and tears, and more into all of this. So thank you for all, everyone. I think I'll hand over to Remy.
So again, a fantastic launch. I mean, always a lot of emotion, thanks to Arianespace. Congratulations to all the team at SES. Well done to you for all these superb achievements. The O3b constellation is a groundbreaking project, and behind groundbreaking projects are remarkable people. I would like to thank all the team at Arianespace on the Russian and European side for this outstanding accomplishment and international cooperation. Soyuz is a fantastic launcher, 5 successful launches for O3b, and that's due to your skill and know-how. A big thank you also to our Thales teams in France, Spain, Belgium, and Italy for your commitment, with a special thanks to Jérôme Verza, the Thales Arianespace project manager, who has been working with those O3b teams for more than 10 years now, since the very beginning of the project. And when we have shared this medium Earth orbit constellation vision with our customer. Today, a particular thought for Umberto Ernetti, who passed away last December. He was the head of our propulsion team in Thales Arianespace in Italy. Umberto was a valuable member of our team and well loved, and we were quite lucky to have him participating to several O3b launches. Thank you to the O3b SES teams who followed the procurement and the project, with a special tribute to Tim Gore and in Kourou, and as well as Pierre Jouve, Olivier Defauchy, and a lot of others that unfortunately I will not mention here. So JP, Paul, Rui, Nellyton, the team at SES, 20 O3b satellites are now in space. Congratulations. So I can confirm that right after separation, Thales Arianespace team took over control of the 4 satellites. So our babies have made their first call home, which is great. We wish you well for the expansion of your O3 business, JP, with these 4 additional birds. It is, as always, a great pleasure for us to collaborate with everybody at SES. And we are really pleased to support your ongoing activities and pursuing the journey with you as a long-term industrial partner that we have been so far and will continue to be. So congratulations to all, and let's have a big round of applause for all the O3b SES task teams who have been taking part in this endeavor and long journey.
Thank you to all. Again, congratulations for this outstanding success. We will be back here in June, beginning of June, with Ariane 5, our heavyweight champion. Will then deliver for AT&T DirecTV and for Eutelsat. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for being with us today. And enjoy the end of the day here in French Guiana and the end of the night maybe in Betzdorf or Cannes and Spain and Belgium and wherever you are. Thanks.
So it's mission accomplished once again for Soyuz, the second Soyuz to launch from the Guiana Space Centre this year, and for the 4th launch from the CSG this year. Massive congratulations to everybody who's really, as they said, sweated blood and tears for today and worked really hard for a superb launch. Best wishes to all the teams on the ground now who are taking over the operations. And thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted that you've been able to watch our show and share this fantastic launch with us. So I'm going to say, until next time, bye-bye.
décollage.